What is poppin' YouTube? Back again with another video. Today we are doing my top 6 running backs you must avoid in 2023 fantasy football. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button as we're putting out more content as we approach fantasy football season. We're going to be doing some mock drafts, so make sure you can get into those with me in the coming days and weeks. Let's go. My first running back you must avoid in 2023 fantasy football is Tony Pollard. Now, I do love Tony Pollard just as much as the next guy. I love the fact for years on years, we were talking about him as an elite level handcuff to Zeke, and last year finally showed he has elite level rushing and receiving upside as a running back. And what of course happens? The Cowboys end up dropping Zeke. So all of a sudden, Tony Pollard is looking like the bell cow in the offense. Now, my issue with Tony Pollard is the fact that when we look at his splits, of course, the 5.2 yards per carry, of course, the 15.6 RB 8 fantasy points per game last season was great. The 16 games. The thing is, we've never seen him get over more rushing attempts than he had. He's never gone over 200 rushing attempts in a season. And even last year, 12 total touchdowns. Last year, really, his total production came on his 12 total touchdowns. Because if we look at the previous few years, 2 touchdowns, 5 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns. He had a high level of touchdowns. Now, if he is the running back one in the Dallas Cowboys offense, yes, I could see him still staying around the 12 touchdowns. And you could say to me, yeah, Caleb, Tony Pollard is going to be getting all the touchdowns that Zeke had. For me, it just feels like the Dallas Cowboys are either going to bring back Zeke or they're going to sign one of these other free agents. We cannot forget that there are some elite level free agents that are still on the market. We have Zeke, we have Kareem Hunt, we have Lenny Fournette. And as much as you might think that all those guys are washed, which they are, they're not their elite level selves that they were 2 or 3 years ago. The fact of the matter is those guys are going to come onto a roster, absolutely destroy some running backs' fantasy football value. So when we're looking right now, if we're drafting today and we're looking at Tony Pollard, we're saying, yes, the sky is the limit. Yes, Tony Pollard has RB1 overall upside in his range of outcomes, but where you're having to take him in drafts, I feel a little bit risky. If we're looking at underdog ADP currently, we will see that Tony Pollard is coming off the board as RB6. Now, when we made a video talking about Tony Pollard just almost a month ago, 3 weeks ago, we were talking about Tony Pollard as the RB8, RB9. But now the fact that you're having to take him, you're having to decide between Jonathan Taylor, Tony Pollard, Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry. I would prefer all those guys over Tony Pollard that are going in that range. But yet, Tony Pollard, you have to take Tony Pollard over Saquon Barkley. You have to take Tony Pollard over Derrick Henry, which to me just doesn't feel safe, even though we look at those guys, and of course, the Saquon question marks and Derrick Henry's age. But we both know that when those running backs are on the field, they are absolutely getting the volume. And so that is my worry with Tony Pollard. And I'm willing to lose. I'm willing to look like an idiot, but I am not drafting Tony Pollard, and he's one of my first must-avoid running back. My second must-avoid running back is going to be Najee Harris. I know I do cheer for the Bengals, so this is not me being a Pittsburgh Steelers hater. This is me just looking at the straight facts of Najee Harris and saying, I don't think he's ever going to get to that elite level production that he had back in 2021. Now, I know last season in 2022, he did deal a little bit with an injury. Now, he still played 17 games, but there was a lot of games where he missed time, where he had to leave the game early. But the thing that really held him in that 2021 season was his receptions. He had 74 receptions as a rookie, but if we look at last season, only had 41 total receptions. Now, the difference is in his rookie season, 17.7 fantasy points per game, put him as the RB6. Last season, 13.2 fantasy points per game, put him as the RB19. And then you're going to say, well, Caleb, the Steelers offense just wasn't as good. Well, the thing is, he had 10 total touchdowns in both of his first 2 seasons. So it wasn't a touchdown production. For me, it was really the receptions were what held him back in his total points per game. And looking at this season, even if he gets the same amount of rushing attempts he's had over the last 2 seasons, that's not going to be enough for all of a sudden him to get back to the RB6, RB7 numbers that he had as a rookie. Because just the fact of the matter is, Kenny Pickett is mobile enough. He's not just dumping the ball down. And all the hype has been on Jaylen Warren in camp. Now, I'm not saying Jaylen Warren is going to come in and split more of the backfield, but I think Jaylen Warren is a very capable backup. And based on what happened last season, I have heard rumors here in the Pittsburgh Steelers beat reporters talk about a little bit more of a split backfield between Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren. Najee Harris is currently going off the board as RB13, which to me is, like we said, is a little bit high considering the fact that we don't think there's much of an improvement this year. Yes, they addressed the offensive line a little bit, but the fact is he was RB19 on a fantasy points per game basis last year. Let's say he can improve slightly to RB17. But the fact of the matter is you're having to draft him right now as RB13 around guys like Josh Jacobs, Jahmyr Gibbs, Travis Etienne, Joe Mixon, where you could easily see, yes, there are some question marks about all these guys. And we're really just looking at Najee Harris saying, yeah, he's getting a ton of volume, but I just don't know if that volume is going to equate to fantasy football points. When we even saw last season, the 272 rushing attempts, it was a little bit down over his 300 rushing attempts his rookie season. I just don't think he gets there because even though we say it was a little less production and receptions. His yards per carry was about the same, 3.8, which isn't great. We need Najee Harris to catch receptions to be fantasy football relevant, and he's just not going to. So Najee Harris is my second must avoid. My second must avoid running back is going to be Kenneth Walker. Kenneth Walker gets competition from Zach Charbonnet, a second round draft pick. The thing for me with Kenneth Walker III is when we're looking, of course, he came on very strong when he was able finally to get the lead role. 13.5 fantasy points per game, put him as the RB 16. Now, in those 15 games played, 228 rushing attempts, 4.6 yards per carry, and also 27 receptions, which is great with 9 total touchdowns. The thing for me with Kenneth Walker, when we're having to look at a little bit more of a split backfield, it's very clear when Kenneth Walker stepped into the Seattle Seahawks backfield that Kenneth Walker was going to be the elite level rushing option. Now, Zach Charbonnet just got the same exact draft capital that Kenneth Walker got last season. So for me to say that, yes, of course, Kenneth Walker is going to be a starter because he's been there a year in the system, but to know exactly what those splits are going to be, the Seahawks valued Zach Charbonnet enough that they were willing to take him in the second round after just investing a second round pick last season. Now, the offense, there's a ton of mouths to feed. We have DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and granted, first round rookie wide receiver JSN. With Geno Smith, who was a highly efficient quarterback, I think the Seattle Seahawks, of course, improved their efficiency. I think they're going to have a lot more scoring opportunities, but with more mouths to feed in this offense, especially with the fact that we do not know what those splits are going to look like between Zach Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker. If we look at Mike Clay, which I absolutely love his projections, we're actually going to see that Mike Clay has it around to like a 58-42 split currently right now between Zach Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker III, where they're really projecting that Zach Charbonnet is going to be that third down receiving back. So all of a sudden, if we're taking into account Kenneth Walker not getting maybe as many receptions, maybe he doesn't get 27 receptions, he gets somewhere around 15 to 20, we're looking at Kenneth Walker a little bit differently in his fantasy point totals. And for me, just Kenneth Walker is a little bit too rich. And yes, if something happens to one of these running backs in this offense, yes, they're going to produce. That's just the Pete Carroll way. He loves to run the ball. I'm just not willing to invest this high of a pick into Kenneth Walker III on my underdogs and in my redraft leagues. My fourth running back that I'm avoiding at all costs right now is J.K. Dobbins. Now, I was starting to get revved up about J.K. Dobbins. I was starting to get very excited that it was going to be J.K. Dobbins' season. But what happens? The Baltimore Ravens just signed Melvin Gordon to come in as a backup, which for a lot of people, that's just an extra camp body. What that says to me is that J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards are just not healthy enough to really be participating. And if they're a little bit worried about J.K. Dobbins, I'm a little bit worried about J.K. Dobbins because last season, J.K. Dobbins said, hey, I'm going to be healthy. I'm going to be healthy. I'm going to start the season. Didn't start the season. And we all saw the lack of explosion that happened towards the later half of the season where J.K. Dobbins had opportunities to just absolutely fly, get out, burst, score touchdowns, just wasn't able to. And last season, 10.2 fantasy points per game in the 8 games that he played in the 92 rushing attempts. Now we're banking on the fact that there's going to be a little bit of an efficiency jump for the Baltimore Ravens under Todd Monken, but that's not enough to say that J.K. Dobbins is all of a sudden going to become this absolute RB1. And when you're having to take him in your underdog leagues, we're talking about a guy that is currently going off the board as RB18. Who are some players around J.K. Dobbins that you could be taking that I would love a total lot more? You have Aaron Jones, absolutely love it. Alexander Madison. I don't love me some Alexander Madison, but I prefer Alexander Madison over J.K. Dobbins. Miles Sanders, who just signed a massive contract in Carolina, is going to get a bulk of the work. Miles Sanders. I love all those guys in the range around J.K. Dobbins, so I'm avoiding J.K. Dobbins when I can. If he, of course, fell to value, I'd be willing to take J.K. Dobbins, but he's not currently falling to value, so J.K. Dobbins is my fourth must-avoid running back. My fifth must-avoid running back is DeAndre Swift. Now, of course, we're happy DeAndre Swift got out of the Detroit Lions system. He was not going to see the field with Jahmyr Gibbs, with David Montgomery, but the fact of the matter is he essentially got traded for peanuts to the Philadelphia Eagles. And the Philadelphia Eagles love to do a running back by committee, which is no surprise and is nothing new for DeAndre Swift. But we love when we're projecting DeAndre Swift, we looked at him as this all-around running back that had the skill set to, of course, be taking the rushing attempts while also catching passes out of the backfield. The only issue is with catching passes out of the backfield, you're catching passes now from Jalen Hurts, who instead of checking it down, he's looking to scramble a lot more often than not. You have A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, who are the main target hogs. So looking at DeAndre Swift, there's also a ton of competition in this Philadelphia Eagles backfield. We have Rashad Penny. We still have Kenneth Gainwell. So we're talking about 3 running backs that as much as I love DeAndre Swift and saying that he's the most talented running back in that backfield, it's all about opportunity. And if he's not given the opportunity, it's going to be tough sledding for DeAndre Swift. And even though last season was the RB15 on a fantasy points per game in 14 games, it was still very depressing with where you had to draft him. The year before that, he was the RB8 with 16.1 fantasy points per game. And you're saying to me, well, Caleb, these are elite level fantasy points per game numbers. You put him in the most efficient offense with the Philadelphia Eagles, he's going to absolutely fly. And I could, you know what? This take might come back to bite me in the butt. But I just cannot be taking DeAndre Swift when we're looking at guys around him. Let's look at exactly people around him that I would rather have. So we have DeAndre Swift, of course, going off as RB23 on Underdog Leagues. We have Cam Akers, Dameon Pierce, David Montgomery, Rashad White, and James Conner. I prefer all those guys over DeAndre Swift because we know that they're going to be getting the touches, and volume is king to me in this range, in Underdog, when this guy's going to be my RB2. And if we did a 0 RB build and these guys are going to be my RB1, I would prefer to take a guy that's going to get volume over DeAndre Swift, who, of course, there's the upside. High upside. He's had high upside his whole career, but when you need him the most, he lets you down in fantasy football. So DeAndre Swift is my 5th must-avoid running back. And coming to my 6th and final must-avoid running back, if you stay this long, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Appreciate you guys so much for tuning in here today. It's going to be A.J. Dillon. Now, we've been saying in the Dynasty community for years, last 2 years, we were hoping Aaron Jones wasn't going to re-sign because all of us that had A.J. Dillon on some type of roster were like, man, this guy, he's the second coming of Derrick Henry if he's able to get all the touches. Well, the thing that happens to me for this season is Jordan Love is now the quarterback. And as much as if you're a Jordan Love believer, I love me some Jordan Love. I think he's going to be fine. I think a lot of people are overreacting with how people are treating Jordan Love. But it's still going to be a downgrade from Aaron Rodgers from the previous few years. And if we look at what A.J. Dillon has done the past 3 seasons, we'll see that he's never eclipsed 11 fantasy points per game. Now, in 2021, got 10.9, so he was the RB29, kind of came close. Last season, 9.9 fantasy points per game, put him as the RB33. And as much as you say, okay, Caleb, they're going to have to rely, the Green Bay Packers are going to have to rely on the running game a lot more. I think that actually plays a lot more into Aaron Jones, using him out of the backfield, short passes out of the backfield, screens. Compared to A.J. Dillon, if they are going to start stacking the box a little bit more, that is going to be a no-go for A.J. Dillon. And where you're having to draft A.J. Dillon, it just doesn't feel right. I mean, we're drafting A.J. Dillon currently right now as the RB34, which you're going to say, Caleb, that's pretty cheap. Why is he a must-avoid running back? Well, he's a must-avoid running back because there's guys in the range that I think have elite level upsides that I like a lot more. James Cook, Antonio Gibson, Zach Charbonnet. You literally can make the argument for all 3 of those guys, which you should. And if you watch previous videos of mine, you know that I love all 3 of those guys because I think all 3 of those guys have elite level upside when they get the touches and if they got the opportunity. Samaje Perine, Rashad Penny, Brian Robinson. Like the 3 guys below him, you know they're going to get volume with Samaje Perine, with Javonte Williams, Rashad Penny on the Philadelphia Eagles offense. As much as I don't like DeAndre Swift, I think Rashad Penny is a little bit cheaper of a value to be taking a high upside shot on. Brian Robinson, of course, nothing amazing, but at least you know he's going to get the touches because somehow Ron Rivera absolutely adores Brian Robinson. So the thing for me is I just see like A.J. Dillon, we priced him there because we love the upside, we love the potential. We say he's the second coming of Derrick Henry. But I just can't do it. I just cannot get on the bandwagon of A.J. Dillon. So I appreciate you guys all for tuning in here today to my 6 must-avoid running backs. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Appreciate you guys so much. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.